Good evening, everyone, and welcome to A Crown Between Two Roses. I would firstly like to welcome everyone and say the following. Good nobles, we come here together in a spirit of fellowship, deepening of our skills, sharing of our knowledge, and a shared interest in the search to find truth through experimental archaeology and historical inquiry. It is in this context that I, Altani Khaligu, on behalf of my kingdom, acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we gather. We recognize their continuing connection to land and culture, and we pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and the elders from other communities who may be with us here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Altani. As you have probably guessed, we were a little bit late in interviewing Alain and Safiya when they were our royals. They're still royal, but our sitting royals. My first question to you both is, do you have a title that you would prefer us to use? Because Countess obviously is not an Eastern title. So that's the first opening question to you both. Do you have a specific title that you would like us to use?
I don't think I have a specific one. I think Countess is fine until I sort my life out. So, yeah, anything is fine at this point, I think.
And yeah, I'm using Count at the moment, and I think that's probably what I'll stick with.
It's got a good SCA tradition to it.
It does indeed, and they're also much easier to pronounce than a few of our other titles. So, you had recently reigned, and you've been off the throne for 3 months now?
2.5, 3, yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of blurred over Christmas and New Year, so some time has passed.
So what do you remember of your reign?
Where to start, I think. I mean, obviously it was an immensely rewarding experience. And so like getting to do all the things that everyone always sort of talks about, of getting to give awards, getting to see the impact that you have on the kingdom. That's all really special. If I was being a little bit, I don't know, cynical, I guess, I remember airports, lots and lots of airports. Like if I never have an airport coffee again in my life, it will be too soon.
I think the other thing that sticks out for me is the impact you have as Crown. Like, you know, we've both been part of households that have had a number of royals over the years, so you see the things that royals do and the decisions they make that affect the kingdom. But when you actually get into the role and you're like, oh, I now get to make the choice that affects this barony for the next 3 to 4 years, it really hits home of, oh, we are in a pretty serious role. Like it's good decisions you get to make, but it really, you know, sort of drilled home how much impact you have as Crown when you're actually in that role. It's very different to seeing it from the outside.
Yeah, and I think for me especially the cultural impact, not just the administrative stuff, because I sort of knew, and we'd talked about it a lot before we even considered entering Crown, about how being Crown is a service role, how this is a thing that we wanted to do to serve the kingdom, but actually seeing the cultural impact that we've had. So we, I guess taking an example from our step down, actually, we were given these beautiful blue feather pins, and even just wearing those for our step down, it was, 20 minutes of court to have people come up and say, hey, we really appreciated the representation. This meant a lot to us. That's really special, and it's really humbling too. So yeah, I think it's just kind of wild thinking about that impact that we've had, and hopefully it's been positive. Time will tell.
I think it has.
I have a question that isn't one of the normal questions. In my perception, you're very young because you're like a couple of generations below me, and the SEA has slightly changed since I was crowned. Do you find that we have actually included all of the diversity that is in our kingdom, or do we need to still continue to work on it? as a flow-on, as mundane world evolves? Does the SEA, are you feeling that the SEA is keeping up with it? That's my question.
I think it's one of those things where if you think that you are at the point where you can stop, you are probably not at the point that you can stop. So I think there's always going to be more work we can do. There are always going to be better ways to include people to continue to grow and evolve and to essentially become socially sustainable within the SCA. I don't know, do you have thoughts before I go off on like a rant?
Rant for a bit.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have made a lot of steps, and I think it's been really lovely to sort of be on this sort of pivotal point where we are seeing that sort of generational change in, I suppose, in a lot of senses, in leadership within the SCA, in seeing that change in attitudes. And I think it's been really cool to see where we've come from and to now see the directions that we're going in. And yeah, I think there is a lot more that we could be doing. What that necessarily is, I don't know. Not entirely anyway. I've got opinions, of course, like I'm sure every member of the SCA does. But I think the most important thing going forward is going to be always having that conversation and having that review and saying, well, these things really worked for us as a kingdom. These things didn't really work for us. How can we continue to grow? How can we bring more facets of the SCA in? How do we need to value different skills, different aspects of the SCA? It's a very nebulous sort of question, I suppose, and a very complex topic to dive into. But I think it's definitely one that's worth looking into.
Oh, I must admit, you sorry, Lilia.
I just said thank you. So.
They're definitely hard-hitting topics that we're going to have to address, I think, or definitely as a kingdom. And they are very sensitive, and we will need to look at them carefully and with sensitivity to all people who it affects.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be super important to remember that none of these conversations are going to be necessarily comfortable. Like, comfort is not something that really needs to be factored into this discussion. Yes, obviously we need to engage courteously and civilly, and we have a code of conduct for a reason. But re-examining who we are as a group and as individuals is always an uncomfortable process. And I think it's the important thing of being okay with being uncomfortable. Anyways, that's my rant.
Thank you. No, it's important to say.
Yeah.
And taking that stand, it's always a difficult thing to do. Probably getting back to some of the more generic, sorry, I suddenly have a child appearing beside me, a more generic topics of about your reign. Sorry, I've just lost the plot. I'm just going to mute myself.
You're right.
Okay, so how long have you both been playing in the SCA?
Or you first.
So,
Age before beauty.
Thank you, dear. So we're 2023. So this will be my 12th year in the SCA this year.
Yeah, this will be my 11th. Yeah. Yeah, no, it is my 11th. Maths is really hard. I'm sorry.
And which groups did you start in?
So I started in what was at the time the Shire of Bacchus Woods, which unfortunately folded a couple of years after I started. And those lands went into St. Florian, which I now play with predominantly.
Yeah, so I started in Rowaney with the College of St. Ursula. Yay, Solivera Scholar. And so I played in the college and in Rowaney for, I think it was about 5 or 6 years. And then I met Alain, and he didn't want to move down to Sydney. So I decided that I guess one has to make sacrifices for a relationship. So I would move up to St. Florian.
I was willing to compromise and move to Mordendale.
Look, Mordendale would certainly have been less warm. I think at this point, like, it is quite warm in our living room in all this garb.
Now, you obviously came in through the university, Alain?
So my path into the SCA was a bit odd. So like many of us, I've always been interested in, fantasy and sci-fi and all those fun things. And so for a long time, I was looking for a way to sort of have some interaction with that. So, I went through some martial arts groups, and they wouldn't let me play with swords for a couple of years. So I went looking for a group that would let me play with swords. And found just my local SCA group through the postcode finder on our main website. Rocked up the first night and they put a sword in my hand.
And then he never left.
Yeah.
So from now that you're both in Queensland, Safi, how do you find it? Is it any different to what you found in Rawene, which is New South Wales?
Well, it's definitely more humid. But no, there have been some, it's not culture shock exactly, but there's definitely some different focuses within the SCA up here. And I suppose also in terms of the structure and the kind of culture around that. I don't know if I could quantify it. It's one of those things where I'll go off on a little rant when something pops up. And now that you've actually asked me, I'm like, oh, what are the big differences? Actually, no, the big difference is that the baronial meetings are much shorter up here. If anyone has ever sat through a Rawene Senate meeting, they go for about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how much business there is. And I think with St. Florian, when I was seneschal, it was 15 minutes, maybe 20, if we had to really discuss something. But for the most part, everyone's like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. I'm glad someone's doing a thing. That's nice. Whereas in Rawene, I think there's obviously being a much bigger group too, there's a lot more different opinions that everyone wants to air. So shorter meetings, which is really nice.
So, Alain, you obviously found your passion within fighting. Do you have another passion within the SCA? And Safi, could you explain what your passions within the SCA are?
Yeah.
Personal passions.
Yeah, so fighting is my big one, but I think the sort of ancillary and supportive one is helping people do cool stuff. Whether that's helping train new fighters when they come in, equipping them, making sure they can go and do the thing that they enjoy. I also make sure that I'm, as much as I can be, available to help set up events. It's I'm young, able-bodied. It's one of those things that I can do pretty easily, and it also means people get to have really cool experiences, like I've had through the years. So being able to help facilitate some of that, whether it's set up crew or stewarding or marshalling, that's sort of my other side passion.
Yeah, so I guess for my part, I would describe myself as a bit of a hot mess when it comes to passions and areas of interest. The things that I have found that I've really resonated with have been cooking. I absolutely adore period cooking, although I don't do it as much as I feel I really ought to. But we've got a few events coming up that I'm really excited to cook for, so that should be really fun. And I've also just gotten my equestrian authorization at Fields of Gold back in November, so I'm really excited to see where that goes. It's something I've always wanted to do since I was a child, and what do you mean I can now actually joust as an adult? That's really cool. But I think in terms of genuine passions, I really love all those things, but I think the reason that I am in the SCA and I continue to stay in the SCA is that I have drunk of the dream Kool-Aid. I am here for the culture of the SCA. That's what I'm really passionate about. That's why I have a TikTok account where I can make long rants about my thoughts about the culture of the SCA. It's how I engage with people. I really just enjoy the SCA as a whole thing. I don't think I could put a finger on any one thing in particular.
Something has actually just come through from His Royal Majesty Tybalt. There we go. The SCA is so many different things to so many people. How do you think about balancing respect for traditional values and etc. with driving forward positive change in the society? Thank you, Your Majesty.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the SCA has been going for 57 or so years now. We've got a lot of culture and traditions that are really cool, that we, a lot of us really enjoy and get to see keep going. I think, and it's, not a definitive answer because I don't think you can really put a single answer on something like that, but it's talking to everybody involved. I think, obviously the one of the main talking points at the moment is the proposal that we put forward with the bods to give us the option, if we wanted to, of looking at potentially a different way of picking a crown. And obviously a part of that is talking to everybody and going, all right, we have the option. Is this something we want to do? And if, it is, then what does that look like? How do we balance it? How do we keep the history that we have? It's a long and hard discussion, I think, is probably the main part of it.
Yeah, and I think also the thing to remember about tradition, and I guess to use the crown stuff as an example, I love a lot of the traditions that have grown up around how we select our crowns, around having the pageantry at the tournament, around the tradition of the golden tassel, which is given to the victor of the tournament, all those sorts of things. I love a lot of the traditions that have come about because of people's passions within the SCA. But I also think that it's one of those things where with tradition has to also come self-reflection. We can't just have tradition and put it on a pedestal and say, this is how we've always done it. This is the way it will be forever. And I think it would be an incredible disservice to all the people that have put in work into the nearly 60-year history of the SCA to just go, yeah, it's fine as it is. Let's never do anything different again. So, like Elaine said, very much a case of discussing with people, of seeking different opinions and different viewpoints. But I think there is no harm in appreciating traditions while also looking forward. And I suppose the biggest example I can think of that is that we used to have crowns, and it was always that, your consort would fight for you to be queen by grace and beauty and all that kind of stuff. And originally in Corpora, it said that you had to be a male fighter fighting for or at least a fighter fighting for a female consort. And look at where we are now. We've had a number of same-sex couples ruling across the known world. We've got a gender-neutral king. I think that's really cool. I think there is plenty of room to grow while still appreciating where we've been. Anyways, that's my soapbox. I have many.
So staying on the topic of traditions, what traditions in Lockhart did you most appreciate, apart from the golden tassel, within your reign?
Ooh. That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I'm trying to think now. Traditions. What are our traditions?
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting because we've got a number that happened at our biggest events, and because we were sort of the opposite to Festival and Canterbury Fair, we didn't get to go to those bigger ones. I mean,
or even if when you were not crowned.
Yeah.
What's your favourite traditions that you both enjoy and respect?
Mine, just so that you have more time to think about it. I personally, when I was crowned many, many moons ago, nobody told me about the tradition of calling forth the mouthguard until I didn't. And then I was reprimanded verbally by an older member of the populace. And then from then, I find it absolutely inspiring to see our mouthguard, who now have their own children and are our knights and peers of our kingdom, kneeling with our young children who are enthusiastic about being there to serve. And I think that is a tradition that I hope is always kept. But it is one that I failed to initiate in my first court, calling forward to mouthguard, because nobody told me about it. So.
I don't think I did either, Lilia.
Yeah, I got very scolded.
Something I was unaware of as well. I know I did call them at some points during the reigns. But I don't think I called them up either.
Yeah, I think I called them up when we had additional mouthguard to add.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was going to say, like, the one that's just sprung up for me is the Pelican Cloak. And the fact that there is, largely the same set of words that gets spoken every time it gets brought up. This is the cloak of the Order of the Pelican. It contains the devices of every member who has ever been admitted to the Order, and yours will soon join it. Like seeing the look on people's faces, because being crowned, you get the best seat in the house, and all awards are amazing, but peerages are slightly magical, I think. Like they are these positions that we've created in our game that we ascribe a lot of status to and specialness to. And yeah, when the bits of regalia get presented and just seeing the Pelican Cloak spread out and then placed over this person's shoulders, those bits of the peerage ceremony are particularly special.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of other traditions, and I know that there are a lot that I really enjoy. And I just genuinely cannot think of them. I'm sure I'll remember them at like 2 a.m. And then there'll be 20 Facebook comments of me going, "Oh, actually, I really like this tradition." And also,
you kind of delete it after you step down because it's not. You just want to get back to normality.
Yeah, there's a lot running through your head through a rain.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the questions has come through from our lovely support staff this evening. Who was your favourite elevation to the chivalry? And why was it Thank you, Magnus. We love you.
Well done, Magnus.
by virtue of being default. But no, that was really special, actually, to be able to induct Magnus into the Order of Chivalry, especially since he was the first Master at Arms for the Kingdom. So that was really nice, and also we just like Magnus because he's cool.
In answer to Handball's question that's just come up on traditions about the knotted sword, we found it in Clem and Ant's house when we went down for Crown Tournament, and I believe we've managed to offload it onto His Majesty to distribute at his discretion.
See, I'm as opinionated as everybody in this chat, and I honestly think that horrible piece of wood with it knotted.
It's very
It's very
practical for a kingdom that spans 2 countries, and you're flying nearly every weekend to go to an event.
Yeah.
And there needs to be some kind of token that you give out, and then somebody else puts it on.
The temptation to give it to Rat and take it back to New Zealand was very strong.
That's right. In fact, the previous Sword of State went across to New Zealand.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So a couple of years ago, Duke Neil and Duke Theodoric had the Principality Sword, and was considering taking it over there. Obviously, international travel is challenging at the best of times when you've got crowns and regalia and all the rest of it to take to an event with you. So yeah, we took that over there as a piece of our history that we can share with the Crescent Isles.
Yeah, it's very large and very unwieldy. So if you would like a sort of demonstration of how large it is, Alain has a TikTok where we went through some of the Lockhart regalia. Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Please feel free to put it up in the post.
And putting the sword on the ground, it comes up like the pommel is at my chest height. Like it is enormous.
And how tall are you?
I'm 180 something centimeters.
6 foot something.
Yeah, about 6 foot. So yeah, it's a big sword.
Yeah.
So you didn't get a photograph of you holding it in that traditional, night with the sword.
Yeah, dang. Missed opportunities.
What you could have done is having laying down in a repose position.
Yeah.
Just gone to the Crusades, coming back. Well, actually, not coming back.
That's a missed opportunity, that one.
So actually, just talking about the Crusades, not actually relevant. But what period did you do for your reign? Because we haven't seen that for Well, I haven't seen it at all in my time at the SCA. It may have been done prior to my time and Lilia's time. So it was really nice to see something a little bit different.
Yeah, so we went with approximately a 12th century Norman, Anglo-Norman-ish, much to the disappointment of Stanzi. I would have much preferred us to have late period garb, but I'm sorry, Stanzi. It just wasn't to be.
It packs down.
We'd had several discussions, I feel like, since we'd started dating, really, of sort of
since we started.
what kind of, well, yeah, since we started talking about, crowns and whether we would like to try it together, was about garb. And I mean, it really came down to Elaine's preferences, because I will pretty much wear anything. Like I said, I'm a hot mess. So I was happy to do whatever period and whatever place. But Elaine was fussy. And so we were like, well, tunics are nice. Everyone likes a tunic. And we have beautiful tunics. We had an amazing team of flying monkeys. And there were, I think, between all the different things, there were about 30 or so people who helped to make our garb. And thank you, Your Grace Altani, for the beautiful veils. We had an amazing team. So
very talented.
This tunic is all hand printed. They were amazing, and like genuinely just made the most amazing wardrobe that we could ever ask for.
Yeah, and I suppose that's one thing that if you're relatively new in the SCA, you might not know. Like, whilst we're the two big shiny people out the front at events, we are supported by an incredible team that we are like eternally grateful for. Like, we can't do this job without all the people helping us out on the back end.
Yeah.
So was it a surprise to you both stepping behind the curtain? Because, you're talking about the two shiny people up front, and it is obviously there is an awful lot of spotlight put on the crown. Did you find it, what was the most interesting thing that you found about standing behind the curtain and seeing what it takes to actually be crown?
Well, I was certainly surprised at the amount of admin work. There are a lot of emails, and I say that like I actually did a lot of the admin work. It was really mostly Elaine. Sorry.
Look, I can't think of one specific thing, but it's definitely different. I've served on royal households in the past, and I've seen some of the court prep and everything else, but getting when you're actually in that role and you have to go, using peerage, like organizing peerage ceremonies as an example, it's like, all right, let's sit down and talk with the person, figure out what they want you to use in the ceremony, then organize the bits and pieces. There's a lot of keeping plates in the air and making sure things are in place to make anything happen that you want to achieve. It's interesting seeing how much, I guess, personality juggling goes on to make things happen.
I think also there was no one particular thing that was especially surprising. I think what surprised us most was sort of, I guess, the scale of it, the magnitude of what you have to do. Because obviously you see a surface level if you've been on a royal household, if you've got friends who have served as crown, even on a baronial level, although that is a slightly different kettle of fish. You see a lot of that prep work, but you don't really see, it's just like the tip of the iceberg, and there is so much more beneath the surface. I think the scale of everything, not like a little bit overwhelming, I think, at first.
Like that first sort of, I want to say, month after you become crown prince and princess, when everyone's going, hey, can you come to our event? And you're trying to sort that timetable and lock things in. It is a very brisk time between winning and step up.
You actually had a shorter time than normal.
I think ours was fairly standard. I think what really did it for us was that we had the 2 weeks of festival. So there was also festival prep in with crown prep.
I mean, it was also good for us being first-time crowns and only being a member of one peerage order. getting to go and sit in on all those meetings at festival and basically have a training run, that was really beneficial.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have a question, Altani? Because I have a couple.
Please go for it. My cat just initially distracted me.
So I'm going to ask some of the one more off the book record. And what is the skill set that you were surprised that you actually had when you stepped up as crown? Like, because everybody kind of has an idea of how they want to reign, and what, you know, if you're prepared, you have a rough idea of how you'd like your court and what period you'd like. But obviously, it's a new experience. What skill set did you go, oh, I'm actually quite good at that?
Yeah. Do you want to start, or would you like some time to think?
I would like some time to think.
All right. I mean, I feel like there was a lot. And I suppose, again, it's one of those things of scales of magnitude. Like, I knew I wasn't terrible at talking to people. But I suppose the nice thing about Crown is that it's a role that you can really grow into if you let it be. And that was really, really nice. So obviously I started our very first court. And I'm sure you can probably hear it on the recording of our coronation, where I was very quiet and I didn't really know how to project because I wanted to talk to this person right in front of me instead of projecting all the way to the back. And I think, honestly, it's not something that I would have noticed consciously that I had in an SCA context. It's really weird, but I don't think of myself as being a different person now that I've been crowned. I suppose there's definitely a difference in confidence that I've noticed, but I don't think there's any particular skill set that I've noticed. Whereas when I've sort of compared it to my mundane life, I'm like, oh yeah, now I can manage teams and things. So I think the difference has been much more, in a weird sense, noticeable mundanely than it has been within the SCA. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Elaine?
Like I was never a great public speaker sort of growing up, and I was definitely nervous about having to do that in front of, potentially 100, 200 people at an event. But I was pleasantly surprised at how well I managed to sort of remember the important bits of court, responses to odes, bits of ceremonies, all that sort of thing. And then I think it struck me about a month in that I went, oh, this is just like running Dungeons and Dragons for my friends. Like, there's absolutely no difference. I can wing this now. Yeah. And then everything became much easier when I made that connection in my head.
Mm. Yeah. And I think the thing that really actually helped with courts was having all of the B&Bs there with us, because they've been doing this for a little while, and they are just a very stable platform that you can then speak from, because they're up there and they're like, yeah, we're cool, we are in charge. And you're like, yeah, wow, it's this amazing sense of confidence that you get, I think, from that as well. And they're just there to politely correct you on something if you've kind of stumbled a little bit on something. The attendance as well, it's having that really good team around that I think also really helps.
My cat Minerva is agreeing with you.
Well, I mean, she is named for the goddess of wisdom, so...
She is indeed. Aren't you? Sorry.
Would you like me to continue, or do you have a
yes,
question?
Please. Oh.
Okay. I suppose my next question is, are you going to reign again? Are you planning to reign again? Or are you going to do the whole, you know what, I'm just going to settle into being this person before I become that person again?
Yeah, I think we'd like to. Obviously, we're going to need a couple of years. Everything's very expensive at the moment. And going into ground, you're going to spend a fair chunk of cash on top of what's available. But yeah, international flights are really expensive at the moment. Worthwhile, but yeah, it's going to be a couple of years before we have another crack at it.
Yeah, and I think with the travel thing, it was quite expensive for us to travel to all the places that we did. But I think that was a choice that we made consciously, that we wanted to go into this and we wanted to see as many groups as we could, especially because we were the first reign sort of post-COVID that was actually able to travel across Australia and Aotearoa. So getting to actually to do that, I think, was something that we really wanted to prioritize as Crown. And I think that's something that we'd like to prioritize again. So yeah, definitely kind of got to let the bank account recover a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, so I think a few years maybe down the track, I mean, you know, he's at the moment he's got to be in it to win it, right?
How did you find reigning after, like, just coming out of the COVID?
I think we didn't really see much of the impact of COVID because all the borders were opened up again, and Leofric and Sabine, our predecessors, had managed to get to a number of groups. So other than, I guess, the backlog of awards and things like that, and obviously people in more isolated groups at sort of the far ends of the kingdom being a little bit, I guess, in need of some company, there wasn't really much else that I suppose would have been different.
Yeah, I mean, like we were as cautious as we could be when traveling, and we did get sick a couple of times during the rain. But yeah, it was good to be able to get to those areas. Like we managed to get to Anyala and the Western Shores, and to both islands on the Crescent Isles. So yeah, I think we got everywhere we wanted to, which was good.
Would you maybe concentrate on some of the smaller groups and the cantons and hamlets rather than the baronies?
Yeah, I think that would be a good place to start. And obviously you look at who's had a visit recently. So yeah, it'd be nice because like we got to go to a number of places we haven't been before. Like we got to go to Adora for Bal d'Argent, which was really lovely. So yeah, it'd be nice to go to some other places that we haven't had the chance to visit yet.
Very much.
So continuing on with the reign idea, what was your favourite moment of being on the throne?
I don't know if I could pick a favorite. I could probably give you a short list, whether you'd call it a short list or a long list. I don't really know, but
choose 5.
Combined or each. I think one of the things, actually, I think my possibly my favorite event of our whole reign was getting to go to Southern Guard Yule. That was really, really special. And we'd had some personal stuff happen fairly early on in our reign, and going to Southern Guard Yule, it was the middle of winter. It was this lovely little scout camp. And in the mornings, like you'd wake up in the shadow of this little mountain and there'd be frost on the grass, and everyone was so warm and welcoming. It was just an absolutely beautiful event to go to. And I think for me, it really rekindled some of that sort of magic of the SCA again. So that was, on a personal level, that was really, really special for me. But yeah, we got to do and see so many cool things. And I guess from my perspective, my favorite things were the interactions I had with members of the populace. That was really cool. So Sir Nathan Blacktower and Lady Louise from Rowaney convinced us to dance at Bal d'Argent, which was very exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking. But we were gently peer pressured into that, and that was a really lovely experience. And getting to give out awards, like being part of someone's, I know people always talk about, you're someone's first king and queen kind of thing, but oh man, it is really, really special. Like, yeah, I don't think anything ever quite matches up to that feeling of being an important part of someone's SCA experience, especially someone's early SCA experience. So yeah, that was really lovely. Your turn. Before I go off and cry.
One similar like that. One of the bits of advice that got given at my vigil was that you will be someone's first peer and you need to act like it. And that, it was never explicitly said when we stepped up as crown, but yeah, having someone come up to you afterwards and go, "Hey, you are my first crown." It's like, oh, I have been part of a formative memory for you now. And it sort of reminds me of like, I remember when that happened to me. I remember the Queen who gave me my first award. And that is a pivotal memory for me in the SCA. So that was really lovely. The other thing that sticks out, again, one of those slightly magic things in the SCA is, as peers, we renew fealty when a new crown steps up. But at our coronation, one of the peers came up to us and swore fealty to us personally with a personalized oath, and that was really special.
That was really special. There was not a dry eye. Let me tell you, that was it's a lot of those really special moments. I think are the moments where you really connect with people, and it's something that I guess in a lot of senses is hard to do as crown, because you are sort of the figurehead. You are up on that pedestal, and you are supposed to be a big visual presence for someone, and to be able to also be a really I guess like you said, a formative personal experience for someone as well. I think that's really, really special and really humbling.
I think on the flip side of that, what were some of the you don't need to give specifics or anything, did you have any difficult times this year on the throne?
Oh yes. Yes. Yeah, I guess our biggest ones were largely some personal issues that we were dealing with, and I hope that they can really come through in how we presented ourselves as crown. Like, I think that would be the biggest concern I have with that. Do you have anything?
There was some big personal stuff early on, but I think the other thing that sticks out for me, and it's not the same sort of challenge, but like when big stuff comes up, making decisions, whether it's at a kingdom level of, hey, does this person get this kingdom office, or hey, are we making the right call by making like a peerage offer based on this advice that we've got, where it might not be overwhelming or whatever the case may be, like going, all right, is this what we think is best for the kingdom right now, and is it B, something I will be happy with in 6, 12, 5 years down the line? Some of those decisions were I want to say difficult.
Yeah, I think it is the thing to sort of remember that, as much as you are the big shiny hat at the front as crown, it is a service role, and how do you ever know that you're serving the kingdom in the best way? Because there are so many different facets, there are so many moving parts, and what might be maybe good on a kingdom scale is not necessarily good on a personal scale, and anything within that spectrum. So I think trying to juggle all of that with the information that we had about different situations, that's been definitely a challenging thing.
So you both have a very strong lineage to big households, and obviously they were a part of your support network, because the bigger the household, the more opinions. Right. Who, other than your peers, past and present, did you find inspirational during your journey?
I mean, I think there have been a lot of people, but I think for me, very special thank you to Altani and Kingiadai, who we would just sort of call at random times and be like, hey, we need advice. What can you give us?
Thank you.
And also our Kingdom Seneschal, Thorold, who was like, yep, I am not setting anything on fire. You are not setting anything on fire. This is all great. The kingdom is running as it should. That was really awesome too. And when we had some particularly tricky patches, I also found that Mistress Rowan and Master Nico have also very good advice. So that was really nice. And Gabs and Stanzi being our SCA parents here, who have occasionally been mistaken as Elaine's actual parents.
Oh, that's sweet.
It is very
Are they that old? I don't think they're that old.
They're not, but it doesn't matter because if you have a very basic understanding of genetics, you go, Stanzi has dark hair and Gabs is tall. Elaine has dark hair and is tall and is always hanging out with Gabs and Stanzi.
It's happened twice now.
And yeah, all our friends at home. And Huguette, who looked after our cats like every other weekend for us, absolute legend, on top of already doing our wardrobe. So like there are too many people to thank, and I think we'll be here for like 5 hours if we go through the full list. But yeah, those people were very, very special, and put it like above and beyond to support us. So yeah, anyone to add?
Yeah, like, I don't think you've forgotten anybody, but the people that stand out for me are, because we weren't members of a lot of the peerage councils, we went and found people to give us advice for those specific ones. So Master Gilchrist from Mordenvale, Baroness Anne from Palit, and Master James from Southern Guard were all people we brought on as part of our official household to be like, hey, if we need, sounding advice or history or just what happened in that meeting, they were all people who stepped up to go, yeah, sure, you come give us a call, like whatever you need. And the other one that sticks out is Sir Nathan Blacktower from Anyala. We met him a couple of times across the reign, and his grace, his courtesy, and his advice were always exceptionally good and well received.
Altani, your turn.
What should I ask? See, a lot of the questions I have are for when we were B&B. And you haven't... would you consider running for B&B?
I think...
Or do another crown first?
I think yes. I think, though, that being B&B is obviously a very different ball game to being Crown. And I suppose it's the common analogy of Crown is a sprint, B&B is a marathon. I think I would consider, I don't know if you'd consider it.
Yeah, like I am not extroverted by nature, and so having to be out the front and be a role for people, I found, it was tiring by the time we got to the end of it. I'm not sure I could do 3-4 years of that, but it's something I'd consider.
Yeah, and I think we've got some time to think about it because William and Lovett are doing an amazing job here in St. Florian, and we don't have plans to move anytime soon. So, yeah, time to think.
We'll see you on the throne first.
Maybe.
So, we've talked about where you're from, how you started. Do you have any family that plays other than household, like immediate family?
No, I don't even think my parents have come along to. Well, no, actually, I guess we're going to kind of count it. So back when I was a collegian, I was still living with my parents on like the far side of Sydney. And so my poor dad had to drive me almost everywhere to get to SCA events. So I really feel like by extension that kind of works.
Made him part of it.
Yeah, and your parents have been.
Yeah, my family have come to a couple of tournaments, but it's.
They came to your knighting.
Yes, they did.
Yes. Yeah.
They've come to a couple of things, but it's not really their thing. They just go, that's that thing, that weird medieval thing Elaine does.
Yep.
But Dad does take some nice photos at events, though, when he comes along.
Look, I know Lilia has a family that definitely comes along to events. And we just drag our children, so.
I'm married into a family. It's SEA based, so that was, that's just ridiculous. And I'm trying to rope my sister in, and she's done pretty well. Like she cooks and has got a big hospitality background. So I think Drake's actually trying to get her to turn up to more things, mainly because he needs new blood in the kitchen.
Yes, more cooks.
But my question is to Elaine, as a recognized peer of the realm within the Order of the Chivalry. What advice would you give to a new fighter? Because obviously you said you've been fighting for 12 years. you know, and when you walk into this society, you have this kind of like shiny idea that it's going to be the whole Schulzer knight in shining armor with a white horse and blowing flags in the wind. What is your advice to that fighter who believes that that's the goal?
That's a good question. The first bit I'd probably say is don't lose that. Like, you need something to drive you. Like, obviously, getting more skilled and getting better at what we do is great, but you need a little bit of passion at the very least to push you through the hard times. Like, you know, there were plenty of Monday nights where I didn't want to get off the couch and go to baronial fighter practice. But there's always this little voice in the back of my head going, yeah, well, you're never going to get anywhere if you just sit on the couch all week. So you need to temper and maintain that passion, I think, and make it sustainable over the long term. Because it is a long-term thing. You know, it took me the best part of 8 years before I was offered elevation, and then another 3 or so on top of that before I was, you know, at a level that would win in a crown tournament. Like, it's a very long-term thing, and so you've got to have that passion, and you've got to have that buy-in, because peerage, you know, yes, we are good at hitting our friends with swords, but that is only, you know, a part of it. You need to be a part of the SCA and be willing to give back to the community that supports you when you are out there on the fields, because, you know, fighting is in some ways a selfish art. Like, you are doing a thing out there that requires a whole bunch of infrastructure and a whole bunch of other stuff to allow you to do your cool thing. You need to be giving that in return to allow people to do their cool thing.
Cool. And Safi, my question to you is, how do you balance your own activities within the SCA and the personal expectation that you have as a consort to support your fighter?
I mean, I feel like I really lucked out because Elaine is very low maintenance in terms of fighters, and it's a conversation that we've had before of what we sort of expect to do as consorts. And I think, I guess, my whole platform here is basically that therapy is amazing. Everyone should have therapy to talk through all of their things, and also communication, because without communication, who knows what's going on. And so we were really clear from the start of our relationship of what exactly we expected from each other as consorts, as partners. And so in that sense, it was really easy. So, like, I don't need to bring him water. He brings his own water. He's got it in a nice little bag. He's like self-contained fighting unit. And I'm kind of there for like moral support and, I don't know, the occasional affectionate punch on the arm or something. So yeah, in that sense, it's been really easy to kind of balance what I'm interested in. I guess the problem for me is that I'm interested in so many things that I just want to go everywhere and do everything. So yeah, that balance, I don't know if I've quite got it yet, but, you know.
I don't think we ever get it. There's always something.
Yeah, as you evolve in the SCA, obviously, and you have more things that you want to do and more responsibilities, and you want to keep that grounding with your households and your friends, it is sometimes hard to find that balance, which is why I asked you, because it's a personal question that even after 20 years of play, I still find myself going, I didn't get time with you. I wanted time with you. And, you know, so I was just like picking your brain to see if I had any skills that I could like just steal, but that's okay.
Yeah. So I'll let you know when I come up with anything.
Perfect.
So unfortunately, we're coming close to the end of the evening, but we do have a traditional thing that we ask you both. What are your favorites? No shit, there I was stories that happened either throughout your reign or throughout your SCA career.
Ooh. Throughout our reign, was there anything? No shit, there it was that happened during our reign. I don't think there was anything particularly outrageous. I feel like you have the better stories, and they have by extension become my stories because I've heard them often enough that I can recite them almost word for word now.
Well, outside the reign for you, Safi. You've fought, you've cooked, you've done service in running events.
Silly activities as a collegian.
We're not really tame as collegians, I think. Although I suppose the story that kind of ties in with both of our experiences at festival was it the first year at Camp Wambaroo where there was the asylum flag on our second year at Camp Wambaroo. So what I have seen, because this is when the college campsite was up that end of, actually still is, I think, but it was the college campsite was basically right on that little dam, lake, pond thing. And there's an island in the center. And at various points during the event, there were parties happening on this little island. And at some point, the asylum had put up a banner on the island to sort of claim it as theirs. And shenanigans ensued.
So I've taken a constab shift, and so we're doing our rounds around the campsite, and I see the asylum banner on the island, and I just think to myself, I'm going to steal that banner. So we wait till about 10 o'clock at night. I have one squire sibling on the shore with a torch to guide me back. I have two others going up to the hall to get buckets of hot water to douse me in when I get out.
Because it's cold at this lake.
Cold.
Like, it was April, May.
Yeah, it's Easter.
Cold Easter weather, right?
And I have one of my household banners in a Ziploc bag tied to my back. So I swim across the lake, swap the banners over, swim back. Don't get hypothermia. And so we drop it. We were actually going to hide it in the Attican campsite.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'd set it up with Ro. It was fine. But the head of the asylum was coming back from the tavern and actually saw us trying to hide it in Attica at the time. So we told him it was the banner from his front gate, and he merrily went on his way. Except the next morning we wake up and our other front gate banner is gone, and there's a bottle of wine on the table which says, better luck next time, love the asylum.
And then they all came like marching down the hill with like a full band kind of thing, playing some song. There was bunting everywhere. My favorite bit of this story, though, is that we didn't put the pieces together until several years later. I'd say it's maybe a year or two after we'd started dating. And he's recounting this story. And I'm like, you know that no one else was dumb enough to swim across the lake at 10 o'clock at night in freezing cold weather, right? And he looks at me and he's like, well, how else do they get across? Everyone else was smart enough to find some kind of flotation device, like an air mattress, that they could row. But I mean, Elaine, being at the time safety squire, thought, you know what? I've prepared for hypothermia, and that's enough.
That's it. Like, we were safe. We had a plan. We stuck to the plan. And honestly, boats don't have the same pizzazz.
You can make a pretty grand entrance on an air mattress, but that's my
Any
opinion.
leeches?
No, it was fine. It was
Well, there
great.
you go then.
I think my favorite one was I've had the privilege to travel over to the States and go to an event called Gulf War. And we're in a break between one of the wars, and there is this call of come forth and receive the sacrament. And I'm like, all right, what's going on here? This must be some weird Trimerian tradition. So I go and kneel down with the rest of my side, and I see the king coming down, and he's flanked by two Templars, and he's handing something out. I'm like, oh, this is getting a bit weird, but when in Rome. And then he gets down to me, and the Templar is holding a box of Girl Scout cookies. And the sacrament is kick ass, don't die, as he puts the cookie in your mouth, and then he moves on to the next person.
See, Safety Squire goes well there too, because he was just boosting your energy levels to fight better.
That's it. Girl Scout cookies, pickle juice, you set.
Yeah. Pickle juice. Oh my God.
It's so good. I got a whole cup of pickle juice at Fields of Gold, and it was delightful. Homemade pickle juice is so good.
This is going to sound very smutty. I do like me a good pickle. But not the pickle juice.
You're wrong, but that's okay. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's the end of this evening, Alain and Safi. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you on. In fact, you've been the first for about nearly a year or 6 months since we've held one of these. So getting back into the groove. Thank you. And Leylii, thank you again for being my co-host. It's always lovely to be with you.
Thank you, all three of you, for participating in this, and for anybody who has sent us messages and is watching the video. Play hard, enjoy. Remember to be kind to everybody around you, and to understand that your opinion is not solely the right opinion. It's everybody's opinion that we have to incorporate. Both Alain and Safi have been a great example of what royalty can do and will do in the future. So it's been a joy, and in the future we will be speaking to Their Majesties Tilbert and Jane. And if you have a suggestion to somebody you would like us to interview, please send it to us in a message, and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.